everybody. What's up? This is Peter Agostin, and welcome to another episode of The House List. Yeah, that's my weekly podcast. It's called The House List. I just mark your name off of it. Yep, it's just like a guest list. It's called The House List. That's what it is. Each and every episode is edited by CJ Stewart. On today's episode, I have the incredible native New Yorker, promoter, curator, and all-around incredible human being, Stephen Dima, on the show. Now, a lot of bands and booking agents and people in New York know of Stephen probably most famously through his work at the South Street Seaport in Lower Manhattan. You know, that's where the big ships and stuff are. It's like the one of the oldest places, neighborhoods really, in New York City. Think of Gangs of New York. So anyway, like, people have played and booked bands at Four Knots, which Stephen has curated throughout the years. The South Street Seaport has like a music series throughout the summer as well. He was also like an alum of East Village Radio, which is a great online pioneering radio station in New York City, which then merged into a news station that's based in South Street Seaport called littlewaterradio.org. Now, we didn't really talk about the station, but we did talk a lot about the Seaport. And I had, specific stuff I wanted to ask him about, things like that. But it quickly evolved into a pretty expansive conversation, which is always what I try to do and try to get to with my guests. Because also beyond the booking bands and booking a lot of rock shows and stuff with Stephen, he is one of the main bookers and I guess production managers of the New York Comedy Festival. And he's been doing that for a long time and has put together and produced a lot of seminal comedy shows in New York City. And I'm talking not just this is through Caroline's, but not just in clubs, but the Garden and the Apollo and Lincoln Center, and like, you name it, the guy's done it. Mark Maron at Carnegie Hall. I mean, Louis C.K. at City Center, which Stephen hooked me up and put me on, got me tickets for years ago. Thank you. But I digress. I mean, it's not really just about that. But as we were talking about specific work stuff, slowly I was able to draw out more of his life story, which became increasingly intriguing and exciting, because as any native New Yorker that's like been in love with music and fascinated with music and shows and comedy and entertainment, then there's a lot more under the surface. And even his father has an amazing history and in that world. And if you get really deep into the conversation, you'll see, because superficially, he's known as a show promoter or a curator, but like any human being, it's a lot more complex than that. And really, he got to start booking shows at the World Trade Center. So just to frame this a little bit, set it up a little bit, our conversation sort of starts into talking about his work at the World Trade Center, which was really the summer or two from 99 to the end of the season in 2001. So if that says anything, and that puts it all in kind of context. But yeah, we talk about so much totally interesting stuff. Bill Cosby, Louis, of course, and just so many rock shows. It's hard to even summarize. So, sit back, listen and enjoy this one. Listen to it in chunks too. This is an epic conversation too. So if you're going on a flight, you're going on a long trip, this is the one to wait and play that then. You got your long commute. Yeah, you're going to love this one, especially if you're a New Yorker, if you've worked with Stephen before. But this is a conversation for anyone that grew up wanting to work in music or inspired to work in music. And yeah, I hope you dig it. I mean, that's all I can hope for, So, and that if you do like it, just, let people know, spread the word. I'm actually not even in New York. I did the conversation with Steven, then I went down to Virginia. So I'm back in Virginia. I'm here for my father's birthday. It's my father's 74th birthday, which is pretty amazing and awesome. I'm in my old childhood bedroom looking out the window at the driveway like I did so many times in my youth, waiting for, friends and girlfriends and whatnot to come over or to pick me up. There's so much still here. This is the same house I grew up in, was born and raised in. It's the only house I really know. And there's still so many relics of my childhood here, even peering over to the bookshelf to see the Silverstein books, The Missing Piece, and The Missing Piece Meets the Big O from my childhood. Just, they're just still there, hanging out. And so many other things. It's pretty amazing. And it's pretty special. But I needed to get this intro done, so I wanted to do it while I was down here. I love doing these outside of the element of New York. So it always kind of, I feel like my tone and my voice is a little different. It's morning though, so I just woke up. I'm drinking coffee, sitting in a chair, looking out the window, and trying to get this done. So again, I can't stress how much I enjoyed doing this conversation with my man, Stephen Dima. He came over to the house, and, I had stuff I wanted to talk about, and then it just kind of grew, and it was fun. He's hilarious, and we had a lot of laughs. So without any further ado, also, there was some music I played at the beginning. Now, I'm not going to say what it is because I don't want it to get flagged. I don't want it to be somehow taken down, but that was a request of Steven's. If you know what that song is, hit me up on Twitter at TheHouseListPod, TheHouseListPod, and you never know what might happen. So again, thank you so much for listening to The House List. Let's check out this conversation now. Well, the thing too is that these aren't really like, I don't really consider it like a formal interview, but I mean, there's stuff I want to talk about because of the fact that you two have been working as a promoter in New York for a long time. So you've obviously, and you've worked in different places for different people. Yeah. But I mean, clearly the South Street Seaport has really been the hub for you for a while, right?
Yeah, it's been a bit of a home and a hub and a blessing and a curse and all that kind of stuff. Right,
but that's not really where it all started for you. I mean, you
it's where things took off. You know what I mean? But depending on what you mean, where did it start? In the sense of what would have ignited.
Well, I mean, I think
doing what I eventually.
Absolutely, but if it wasn't basically for Siren Fest kind of stopping and moving there, I think that's what really started the South Street Seaport thing for you, right?
No, that came much later. I was actually doing shows at the World Trade Center,
right? Like daytime stuff, right?
Both. There was this really cool PR agency, and I didn't do PR or anything, but I was friends with these folks, and I started working with them. And one of their clients was the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey, and there was a gentleman there who.
So doing PR for Port Authority.
Well, no. Well, their client was. No, I specifically said I didn't do PR.
No. Not you.
I actually have a funny story about it. Was called Schwartz Public Relations, and there was a very small sort of boutique firm, and the main guy, Barry Schwartz, who's probably in his 80s now, he ran the thing, and he was so I needed work, and I was working there, and he actually didn't email. He would write out his emails on a legal pad, and then I would type them into the computer.
Wow.
That's basically what I would do. So this is kind of like late 90s or something, right? So anyway, I got involved with doing the shows at the World Trade Center, and a lot of them were radio station affiliated. You know? So there was like the Kiss FM series, and this kind of stuff, and towards the last, the very, so I did that I think like 2 or 3 years in the last.
So what year? What time frame is that?
So there would have been like 99, like 2000, 99, 2000, 2001, I think.
Okay.
So the very last year of the World Trade Center, literally, there were some other cooler things. I was sort of given a little more carte blanche, and I was working with FUV, kind of doing things, and sort of taking more, and also there had been this oldies series, but at the time, and even now, sort of a lot of the oldies folks were sort of like, there weren't a lot of them around anymore, or original ones,
We're talking about like the 50s crooner type.
that kind of stuff, Shirley, Morello,
right. And Frankie Valli and stuff like that.
A lot of the other ones were like sort of very expensive. But anyway, the point being is that I started booking a lot of like Alex Chilton and the Box Tops and that kind of thing, which was total fun because at the time, Alex was alive and he was in great form, and we didn't call it like the oldies series. I think it was like Summer Hits, the World Trade Center or something like that.
Yeah.
It's like, because they didn't, those, like the Trogs played, Dave Davies from the Kinks played.
Wow,
which was,
that's amazing.
Which was, it was. I mean, for me, as the major Kinks fan. And so being able to do that kind of, so suddenly I was given a sort of reign to kind of, free range free range chicken eggs. To kind of book some cool things, but within that sort of corporate Port Authority,
Right.
So to them it was like, oh, he's booking the oldie series, but to me it's like, oh shit, it's Alex Chilton, and
I have access to
Dave
this
Davies,
stuff.
I have access. NRBQ played the FUV thing,
Were you Were you the one that was coming up with the ideas
at that point in time? Yeah.
Cool. So you had the creative
like,
freedom to do that.
Yeah, it's at the time, yes, sure. Absolutely, and within those those guys, within what they needed me to sort of deliver, I was able to do cool things. And obviously, Alex Chilton was one of the coolest ones, and they were great because it was like the band, they're all from, Memphis, so they all went to high school together, and instead of sitting backstage and talking to them about, all these amazing people that were like they all went to high school, and like what was in the water to, And of course, Alex was a little weird, but he was cool, and Dave Davies, there was about 10,000 people. I still meet people that say they were at that show. It was a lunchtime show.
Yes.
And there were about 10,000 people on the. It was at the plaza there. There was this little plaza where the Globe was in between in between the buildings, and the stage sat at the foot of Tower 1.
Is it were they like on Friday afternoons or something?
They were all different. I think that series was probably like on a Thursday. That might have, no. You know what? I think it was. There was a Bloomberg did a blues series, and that was cool too. I tried to book some cool people. I remember Guitar Wolf played
cool
one year. I kind of snuck him in, but most of it would have been the usual stuff. But I think I think Dave Davies played on Thursday. But the cool thing is that I'm Facebook friends with Dave and his son.
Wow,
Christian Davies.
Cool.
And on September 11th, Christian Davies actually posted a video of his father at the World Trade Center doing Father Christmas. This was in August. It's pretty amazing. But if you watch till the end, you'll see me with hair come out and
on stage
and say thank you for coming. It was pretty great. And so
you kind of took on the Bill Graham sort of role in that setting. You were like the Bill Graham of Lower Manhattan.
I don't. How so?
No, really specifically because I think there was like some stories of him like at Winterland, like in San Francisco with the Dead, like on Christmas, like coming out like dressed as Santa Claus and shit. That's the analogy I'm trying to make. Well, it would have been cool if in August I did come out dressed as Santa Claus. It would be pretty great. But I didn't know he was going to do that song. But it was enough to book Dave Davies, and that's huge.
And it's really funny. Look, I look back, because Dave is, he's sort of come back. There's talk of a Kinks reunion and stuff. Him and Ray actually played, but he does these city winery gigs and stuff like that. And he's sort of kind of back. And I remember at the time it was a very he wasn't doing. He might have done some things at the Bottom Line at the time or something, but I remember there was a gentleman who I still know, and he did a lot of these oldies things. And I remember him telling me that I probably paid too much for Dave Davies because which I totally did not. You know what I mean?
Okay.
And but because I was such a fan that the agent probably saw knew
took
that
advantage of you?
Yeah, I took advantage. But there's no way. I'll tell you when the tape recorder's off. But I would have paid way more than I paid for him. It was pretty incredible. I couldn't believe that it happened. But
I mean, you can kind of tell when you're paying too much for someone. Like there is a line, like
I won't admit that on this,
Right.
But
who was the agent? Do you remember? I mean, there's nothing wrong with remembering that. Right?
I think it was this guy Mitch Carduna. Who I actually know from a whole other life. I kind of forget who it was. It's certainly not. I don't think it's the agent now.
Sure. I mean, that's so much time has changed since.
Fast forward years later, when I was on East Village Radio. I had a show for many years, and I actually messaged Dave Davies through Facebook to do an interview, and he said okay.
Cool.
And up until the morning, the Sunday before my show was on a Monday at that time. And up until then, I wasn't really sure, like maybe it's not Dave. Maybe it's just somebody. Maybe it's just some fan who has.
That was running the Facebook account.
But we had scheduled like a Skype call to kind of just review what we were going to talk about the next day. And this was like a big deal. Like this is Dave Davies, the Kinks. This is a massive thing for me.
Yeah.
And I remember I'm placing the Skype call, whatever. And he had the video camera on for a second, and it's like, holy shit, it's fucking Dave Davies sitting in his house, and he like fumbles and turns off the camera. Huh. So then we talked, and it was great. He sent me a bunch of songs that he had recorded with one of his sons, and all this kind of stuff. Yeah,
it's unreleased material.
Unreleased thing, and I don't think he's ever released it. But I played it on the show. That was
cool,
that was great. So anyway, that kind of it was a crazy summer.
Were you working where were you working out of? I mean, was there an office around the World Trade Center?
Yeah. I mean, I worked from home, but there were there were so many shows. We basically would live there for the summer. There was like 80 shows a summer.
Wow.
There was a lunchtime show and a night and an evening show, and there was a country station at the time. I remember the Dixie Chicks played. All these awful country bands played, but they were pretty good. And
they're just open to the public shows.
They were free shows. Right, there was this country station in New Jersey, and all these like crazy New Jersey people that would wear the T-shirt would come and watch the most horrendous country acts. It was sort of the beginning of that whole like new country bad thing. But the Dixie Chicks were pretty cool, and anyway, and there's Kiss FM and CD 101. That was pretty horrible. The people were great, but the bands were terrible. And then of course FUV. That was a lot of fun because I could sneak cool things in there.
Yeah, that one still to this day presents really great shows, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Well, we'll get into that in a second.
Yeah.
And then so it was a pretty interesting. Yeah, I mean, so I worked from there. It was 4 days a week. And Friday nights were actually amazing. They were Latin shows. Which I went on to do some at the Seaport too, and they were always a favorite of mine. There was always a huge party, but these guys who did it at the Trade Center, this guy Nick Lugo was his name, and they were huge people. The bands were amazing.
So it was all live bands, no DJs or anything like that, or how would it be?
No, every now and then there was a DJ.
When you're talking about Latin music, is it like, are we talking about freestyle, like 80s stuff, or is it going more into like salsa and merengue? And
salsa and merengue. Yeah,
cool.
Yeah,
very cool.
And some pretty big artists. And there would be like 3 or 4 bands. It was insane. But when those horn sections got, I mean, a lot of times it would, like when that stuff is like not good, it could drive you nuts because it's it sounds like Light My Fire, the break, which is really annoying too. You know what I'm talking about?
I know exactly what you're talking about. I know, yeah.
But when it's great, and the horn sections, like, just fantastic. And wonderful people and just really great. I got a Latin award after, it was just kind of a funny thing. After September 11th, they had like a thing, the promoter. But I always joked I got this, Latin award for doing the shows at the Trade Center. But we had a lot of fun.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So then I at the time also with this PRHC, there was this huge family event called Children's Day, which I fell in love with because it was 13 was a partner at the time, Channel 13, PBS and LIW, and we're all involved in the Children's Museum of Manhattan. So it was all these great people that I met at the time, and I sort of got bit by this bug when the real Elmo would be there, and when he would come out. And when you saw 3,000 or 4,000 4-year-olds lose their shit, it was amazing, to watch. So I got very addicted to that. So
what's the real Elmo like?
Well, he's no longer the real Elmo. Kevin Clash, who was an amazing guy, but I think he had an affair with an underage. There was allegations, and he quit Sesame, which is very, very sad. He was a lovely guy. I don't know.
Wasn't there a documentary about him or something?
There is, yeah. That came out right before that whole thing, I think.
Wow, I've never seen that.
And I worked with him a number of times. So I was going to. Anyway, we can go back to Elmo if you like. But one of the early days of working with the stars. But basically what happened was after September 11th, I went to a woman that I knew who worked at the Downtown Alliance at the time, and I called her. And she said, "What do you want? What do you want? You want a job? What do you want?" I said, "We need to do Children's Day again," because I knew that remember this is our shows ended the week before September 11th. They were supposed to take the stage down the following
the season, right?
The season, yeah. So we were supposed to take the stage down the following week, the following Thursday or Friday. Wow. And I was supposed to pick up a check that morning, and I'll never forget the night before on September 10th. It rained. Pouring rain, and the woman from the Port Authority had called me and said, we have your check. I said, you know what, I'm gonna come down. I rode down on my bike on the West Side Highway, along Hudson River Park, and went to get the check. I met her at the foot of One World Trade Center, and that was it. Next morning I woke up. It was September 11th, and
holy shit.
Our world changed, and. So I called this woman at the Downtown Alliance, and I said, look, we need to do Children's Day, because I knew that if we could do that, and then if I could see that joy one more time, you know what I mean, that everything would be okay. It was like a personal thing. Mm-hmm. And that was sort of the early formations of we went to her, and she said, look, how much you need, whatever, and we talked, and then a couple of months later, everyone got together, and that's where River to River was formed.
Oh, yes, River to River, right.
So, which was, to rebuilding the arts through, rebuilding Lower Manhattan through the arts and stuff like that. But anyway, so fast forward to the Seaport, and I had a bit of history at the Seaport because my dad had owned a restaurant on Ann Street.
That's right. Yeah, I remember you telling me about that. So wait, real quick though, did you grow up in Manhattan? Or
I grew up in Brooklyn. But I spent Sundays with my dad, at his restaurant, and at the time. There was Sunday and that's gone forever. Where there were parts of Manhattan that were dead, on a Sunday. There was no one. Right. You know what I mean? And I remember loving that. It was really cool. It was a bit like those movies where, zombie. It's a bit like a zombie movie where some virus kind of wipes out everyone.
And the city streets are totally empty.
Just totally empty. He had a
restaurant.
No one really lived down there at the time. You know what I mean? Right. And so. And the restaurant wasn't even open. My dad would just take me in to go do what he would sit in his office and do shit, and I would just play restaurant. You know what I mean?
Right.
But we'd walk around and so.
What was it? What was it called?
The restaurant was called the House of Capri.
Nice. So what kind of fare would that be?
It would be Italian.
Italian? Cool.
Italian.
Of course, Capri. Yes.
Yeah. Well, it's what are you going to do? But it was. Italian sandwich, shop. He told me all his life. My dad passed away in 2011. Mm. He told me all his life that he used to make 2,000 sandwiches a day.
Wow.
Yeah. And I still have his bread knife.
Wow.
I think about it every time I'm slicing bread. It's like my treasured possession from my dad. It was made in Germany or something.
Amazing.
Whatever. His bread knife. But anyway. So
that's something you use every day almost too.
Yeah, every day. Yeah. I always get mad at my wife because she leaves it in the sink, and I don't have to dry it and make sure Anyway, so we digress. So I kind of go into the Seaport and kind of falling in love, rediscovering, becoming re-obsessed with that part of town and parts of the seaport that I hadn't thought about, hadn't been there since high school, and so it created the Seaport Music Festival, and brought a lot of the partners from like FUV and Bloomberg, and a lot of the partners found a new home for a lot of the series at the Seaport. But on Friday nights, I started. I was for some reason I that is either escapes me now or I never really knew. They gave me sort of carte blanche to kind of do more and more. That they trusted me to sort of do not whatever I wanted to, but like kind of do my own thing.
Who do you even have to answer to? I mean, obviously there's people that own property around there and own the businesses.
The funding at the time had come from River to River, and it wasn't a lot of money from them, and so I think they were just like, the Seaport's an obligation. We have to give them money, and then the Seaport themselves were like, dude, all right, cool.
Is that like a board of people, or how does?
Well, River to River was.
Yes,
it was a steering committee, which I eventually became part of as well.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Because there were what ended up happening was I started booking the stuff, and I was Delphine Blue, who's a very well known, who's a friend of mine and a very well known New York DJ. She was BAI, Sirius, FUV. For years.
Popular radio DJ,
yes, and DJ as well. She DJ'd at the Ritz back in the day.
Nice.
And just all around well-known, well-loved New Yorker. And she was the host of the shows at the World Trade Center. And we sort of bonded for the FUV stuff. So we bonded and became friends. And so the very first show that I booked at the Seaport was Polyphonic Spree.
Cool.
Yeah. And there were more people on stage than there were in the audience. There was like 26 people.
I know, it's a big ensemble there.
There was 5 people. Two of them were Paul Simon and his son, and 3 of them were friends of mine. And then the rest were just tourists walking by, going, "What the hell is this?"
Right.
I think I remember what DeLauder actually calling the agent. I don't remember who it was at the time. And so, I mean, basically, why am I here? You know what I mean? But maybe I just imagined that. But the Paul Simon thing was pretty cool. He was married to what's her name, who was from Dallas, and so friends with Edie Brickell.
Edie Brickell,
friends
yes.
with what's his first name? The dude
from the band. I'm not sure.
Polyphonic Spree. But anyway, that
alone has got to please the band to a certain degree.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, maybe they were. I don't know. Maybe Paul Simon came to see him all the time. I don't know. But it was cool. I have pictures. It was cool to be able to go to the Seaport at the time and say, "Hey, Paul Simon was here last night." No one else was, but he was here. But
you've done so many shows. I mean, there where it's like sometimes it's interesting because I've seen giant, huge, attended shows. I mean, the festivals obviously keep bringing larger and larger numbers, but you've done a lot of smaller headline plays, like in different little nooks and crannies of that area, where it is like you will get just 5 people, and it's like people that are walking around too. It's a very unique
very
experience.
Used to just 5 people, yeah. I'm very used to just 5 people.
Right.
Well, no. I mean, the festival itself, obviously, for many years, it on Friday nights, it was the place to be on Friday nights. It worked great. I mean, I sort of set out, and I've always said this. I mean, at the time, my goal was to, because a lot of the other venues of River to River, people were doing big shows, and but no one was really doing anything for, like, I literally would say, like, what about people who go to like Mercury and Bowery Ballroom and stuff like that? What about them? They don't necessarily want to see Dar Williams. You know what I mean? Like, that's fine. Right. And nothing against her, but sure. And part of it too was like wanting to do like something cool, and I wanted to basically like create Bowery Ballroom outdoors. Do you know what I mean?
Right,
so
and you've been very good for those bands too. Guitar-driven rock bands, garage bands.
Yeah, I mean, so somebody you would see, at Bowery, you can now come, in March or April, you can now come see in the summer for free out on the pier, and you could smoke and drink, and it was a very unique place to New York City or anywhere other than New Orleans.
Sure, sure.
That you could actually stand on the pier and drink an open container of beer. It's pretty great. So that was a significant thing, and of course by the water and the tall ships and the buildings and the lights. You know, at night it was
it's beautiful.
It was just magic. You know what I mean?
And like you even had the backstage or the green room for some period of time was on the boat too, on the big boat. Well, if I'm not mistaken,
you are, but that's
I am mistaken.
Well, it's
I went up on. I've been on.
That was part of Four Knots, which we're going to get to.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Yeah. No, you don't have to apologize.
Right,
it's all good.
Because it started as Seaport music festival.
So what happened? Because you seem to really want to talk about that.
I want the facts because there's a lot of stuff.
So the Seaport Music Festival started 2002, right? So now Siren started, I think, 2000 or 2001. So it was a very, very similar thing. We were doing very, very similar things. I had corresponded with Diane Perini at the time.
Right, from the Village Voice.
That's right. And it was never really conflict because, Siren was one day, the beginning of the summer. The Seaport Music Festival at the time ran through the summer every Friday night. So if somebody was playing at Siren, they could, if we really wanted, they could play at the end of the summer. It's fine. It's like, it always worked out. It was always great. There's always a great mutual respect. And when I learned that, I was a huge fan of Siren, and nobody was really doing the type of artists that we were doing. I mean, Bowery and indoor venues were, but no outdoor. I mean, this is years before Summer Stage and Celebrate Brooklyn would even think of booking a band like Always or something like that.
Right.
Do you know what I mean? That they were, it wasn't until probably 2007 that I think that they started to take notice of like, hey, wait a second, why is Time Out and The Voice and why is the New York Times writing about the Seaport? You know what I mean?
Right.
Which was a huge thing. It was like really exciting. You know what I mean? To like sort of take these little shows that are booking on the pier and sort of get that kind of recognition and get that kind of respect and just that kind of excitement. That was the big thing, the excitement. Yeah. I mean, I would stand at that stage and like cry sometimes when like there were 3,000 or 4,000 people would show up for some band from the UK that no one really, you know what I mean? Like,
right.
That was a thrill, man. That was just really exciting to like bring people there. And sort of give them that, and this sort of incredible gift, and also to it was exciting because I loved the Seaport so much, and I knew, and it still does. It always had for years had this perception of this. It's just a tourist destination, just a tourist place,
right.
And I've said it many times. To be able to change that perception even for 2 hours on a Friday night was really significant, was really exciting and really incredible. And I like to think that a lot of that ground, that laid the groundwork for a lot of what's about to happen there. You know what I mean? That it was never in a million years recognized as a venue, a place that you would go to for a sandwich. It was never mind a concert or a show or to see Animal Collective. I mean, that made no sense. But it did make sense, right? Like you just had to show people, and so that was an incredible thing. So then, what happened in around 2011? Siren was coming to an end, and I literally emailed Diane. I said, "Hey, should we talk?" It just makes sense. And so we met with The Voice and created Four Knots, which was separate from the Seaport Music Festival. As a matter of fact, I think the first year of Four Knots. We did a joint, which we ended up doing a lot, like joint events and things. The Seaport, Four Knots and the Seaport Music Festival present Bloody Blue, and we did Ted Leo. He did the 10th anniversary of Tyranny of what's it called?
As Ted Leo and the Pharmacist. Yeah.
That's correct. Yeah, I'm embarrassed to hope Ted will have. I'll think of it in a second. But anyway.
I'll do a voiceover over the top.
All right, cool, yeah. But I think Ted, by this point, knows I love him, and I'm just having
you've booked him plenty of times.
Yeah, which was a huge part of the history of the Seaport Music Festival. And so we did a kickoff to Four Knots. We did a show on the Saturday before with Ted, which was massive. And he played the whole record and then some. And cool. then the following week was Four Knots. So that's how Four Knots started. And
now you've been doing it now for what? How many years now?
It's 2011 till now.
Right.
Yeah. So now there's some changes this year. There's new regime at the Voice, and they're figuring out what they want to do. There's probably not going to be there won't be a Four Knots this year.
What?
Yeah. And so they want to kind of do a bunch of smaller things and sort of build into a much bigger. They want to kind of take it to a whole other level in 2018. So that's what's happening there.
So it's another chapter is upon.
That's the next podcast.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
But just to go back real quick, because there's people outside of New York City that listen to this, I'm hoping.
Yes,
I mean, I know.
One always hopes.
Yeah. So just so people have some context, the Siren Music Festival that we had mentioned was something that happened on Coney Island.
That's correct. Yes.
For about 5 or 6 years as well. Something.
No,
like that.
10. That's
10.
10 years. Yeah.
Because I remember some of the I was a talent buyer at the Knitting Factory for a couple of years, and some of the Knitting Factory staff worked the door backstage. Shay and Gene.
Oh, sure, yeah.
So I'm sure you remember them, and
absolutely, yeah.
Gene, so great guys. But I remember those experiences.
Yeah, Gene has worked Four Knots several times in the early days, and Shay worked the first year, But yeah, no, Siren was 10 years out of Coney Island. It was amazing.
Yeah, it's a hell of a run.
It's like to go back to like what, my history and stuff like that. I was, grew up in Brooklyn and.
What part of Brooklyn?
Well, I was born in Clinton Hill.
Oh yeah.
And I grew up in Marine Park.
Marine Park. Okay,
yeah,
interesting.
Yeah, it's kind of way out there.
Yeah.
By Kings Plaza.
How was that growing up there? What was that like?
It was fantastic, for the most part. It was, to me, my wife's from Texas. I mean, when I say to her, like to me, it was suburbia. You know what I mean? There was a city. Mm-hmm. And we, because there were big houses, yards, and things like that. Yeah. But someone from Texas, it's the city. You know what I mean?
It's still the city.
Yeah, right? It's Brooklyn. It's the city. But yeah, I mean, it was. I mean, the worst part about it was. It was like 2 hours commute. I mean, when I first started working in Manhattan, like it was a nightmare. You'd have to get up.
So you were living all the way out there, even back then, going to and from work and stuff.
Yeah.
That is a hell of a commute.
It's a commute, But there was a club out there when I was a kid that it still amazes me to this day. Look at this, tying things in. Remember I mentioned the agent?
Yeah.
Mitch Carduna. The name comes up again. Who thought I would ever be able to circle back? He booked this place out in Brooklyn called Zappa's, right?
Zappa's.
When I was a kid, it was like I lived down the street.
Nice.
Now this is out in Quinton Road. This is like out in Brooklyn, right? Like 2 hours from the city. But it was kind of like Maxwell's in the sense that it was like if bands would come from the UK, play Manhattan, and they were able to play Brooklyn because nobody was going there.
Sure.
Except people were, people out in Brooklyn. I mean, they're like everybody played. So I see Johnny Thunders,
nice.
Like Amazed Joan Jett would play. Like this was out this like.
How big of a room was it?
It was like the size of Maxwell's. I mean,
nice,
there was a big bar. It was a pretty big room. Back room and everything. The whole thing. Like it was a proper club.
Ramones, I'm sure.
Definitely the Ramones played.
Twisted Sister.
No,
that was not really the.
I
just know that they pounded that circuit so hard.
Of course, have you watched the documentary?
Of course, that's the only reason why I mentioned it.
It's amazing.
It is
that documentary. I got into this thing where just recently. Now I wasn't a big Twisted fan. I appreciate where they come from.
Sure,
but anybody listening, it's a great New York story.
Yes,
and it's a great I love that story. So one of my very first jobs was work. I worked for Atlantic Records, right? I was like executive messenger.
Huh. Okay.
Right?
Nice.
Which means that anytime like Ahmet Erdogan needed like a case of soda, that was me.
No
way.
Wow.
Totally fucking amazing.
Cool.
Right? And met the Stones at the time, and crazy stories.
What is this? The 80s?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I knew this Jason Flom, right? So remember when the guy's talking about how the president of Atlantic Records would call him into the office and say,
right.
Jason, you got to stop mentioning Twisted Sister.
Yeah.
If you mention their name once more, you're fired. right?
Right, yeah. He was the champion of the
he was the champion of the band, and then the band they were kind of like gaining some ground in the UK.
Right.
And the guy who was the head of Atlantic Records in the UK was in the New York office, and Jason pulled him aside and said, "Listen, you got to hear this band. You got to go see this band. They're playing the Marquee or whatever, however the story goes." So the guy goes back to England. He goes to see Twisted Sister, signs him on the spot.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And then he calls the guy. Doug Morris was the president of Atlantic. Calls him the next day and says, "Listen, I just signed this amazing band." And Doug Morris goes, "Who?" And he goes, "Twisted Sister." Doug Morris. They suck. I hate that they suck because of course they suck. We're going to sell 1 million records,
right?
And that's how the movie ends. But it's talk about perseverance. I mean, persistence and hanging in there. I mean, that movie is incredible. They sold out like the Palladium by themselves. Like this is at a time. This is before the internet and like releasing where you could become a star from YouTube. This is like they did all themselves.
Yeah, they built it up from playing small bars in Long Island and
totally.
Coming up.
It's a great story.
Yeah.
There's a lot of these movies I've been like I'll listen to when I'm doing if I'm doing the dishes or something. And,
right.
You know what I mean? And like there's the Michael Alec one about the club kid. That's another like great New York story.
Me and him have been going back and forth about.
Serious?
Yeah. He agreed to do the podcast. We've always like hit weird scheduling.
Oh, amazing!
So,
yeah.
Yeah, I'm most interested in talking to him specifically about his days as a promoter.
Yeah,
and not the other part of the story as well.
You've watched that film, right? I forget what it's called. Yeah. It's like all these like old school people, and then and he was like the new club kid, and this whole new culture, like fascinating.
It's very fascinating.
The scary stuff is a little weird, but
the controversial stuff, it's weird, and it's obviously there's like Macaulay Culkin played him in the Hollywood version of it, but the story of him and the club kids as like doing these like sort of outsider renegade parties is interesting and doesn't seem like it's a story that's really been properly told. Like,
no, I don't
pre-controversy.
So. But the part that was the takeaway from that,
right.
From actually both those films, they're kind of like they kind of work together very well in a lot of ways. Mostly because they're great New York stories. They're about New York culture, about New York arts, about the diminishing. The whole sort of the Giuliani years of putting the kibosh on the whole nightlife scene, that doesn't really exist in New York City anymore. Yeah. And even and of course it sounds silly to say, but even the Twisted Sister, sort of culture of how they their whole thing was sort of staying out of Manhattan. It was a very very interesting thing. They kind of like. Even though they didn't maybe believe it themselves, like the whole disco thing at the time and the whole club scene is very, very interesting. Where like if you grew up in like Brooklyn or Long Island or these places, disco was this evil thing that like somehow these like, I'm half Italian descent, but somehow these sort of this like kind of macho Italian subculture in Brooklyn and Long Island kind of grabbed hold of Saturday Night Fever, basically, right? And John Travolta. And so that was just it never had a chance, I mean, like Saturday Night Fever is like one of my favorite records now. But as a kid, I would never admit that. Do you know what I mean? Like the fucking Bee Gees were amazing. Like, the songs are amazing.
Yeah, but you can't say that.
It's like one of my favorite songs of all time. But at the time, like in Manhattan, there was cool. You know what I mean? Disco was this whole other thing. I mean, Studio 54 and Jagger and all this David Bowie and all these people like hanging out and that whole culture was completely different scene from like Long Island and Brooklyn. But Twisted Sister kind of like latched onto the whole disco sucks thing. They have a whole routine in their act.
And subsequently they get that audience will also latch onto that.
Of course, it was like a thing. But I'm not sure they even believe it. It was like a shtick. I mean, it worked. But
their shtick was perfect. Yeah.
But that was a fascinating thing. And to go back to my dad, he owned one of the most famous gay bars in New York City.
Really?
Yeah, after the restaurant.
Oh, interesting.
And he would bring home like test pressings of all this like amazing music.
What bar was this?
It was Badlands.
Okay.
Very famous. There's a movie that with Al Pacino cruising.
Yes, I own it. Yeah.
You own it?
Yeah, I got the DVD.
Random. Well,
Badlands, and it's William
that's Friedkin.
Yeah. What an incredible.
Totally. Yeah. Well, we could talk about all that. Well, don't get me started on that. But the voice of anyway. So anyway, yeah, it's a crazy movie. But Badlands is in that film. These are all New York. Yeah,
Oh.
it's filmed there.
Shut up.
Right? There was Badlands and Ramrod. Those were the two, Christopher Street. That was whole culture, amazing. And that's really where, like, you know, a lot of the music sort of started. I mean, like, my dad had all, like I said, he would, like, DJs would go there.
So what DJs are we talking about? Larry Levan?
Larry Levan, yeah.
Really?
Actually, yeah. Paradise stuff. You
Paradise
know what I mean?
Garage.
Like, knew all those
DJs.
people. My dad would come home and talk about all these places. Like, I could not, like, compete, compete with my dad on any level. There was a point in time where everyone knew my father. Everyone in the West Village, at the Ritz, at the.
What was his name?
Charles Dima.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, and so it was an interesting thing to sort of grow up with the knowledge of these things. It was cool. It was
but you were
great.
you were into rock and roll, though.
Yeah, of course. I mean, I was listening to, whatever, from Rolling Stones to the Sex Pistols, whatever, you know what I mean? My dad, The Jam,
Nice.
I was, but, he was, I don't know, crazy stories. Like, he was there the night, some Patti Smith and her brother, Sid Vicious story. Anyway, just crazy things.
Wow.
Knew, yeah, I mean, Jagger would go to the bar, like all these crazy things, and knew all these crazy people, all these very, like, well-known New York club people.
Right, and there was just a time when that was just it was such a rich period of time for music and nightlife.
That's the interesting. That's the interesting thing, that where are we headed? You know what I mean? Like, what's going on in New York City? And so to go back to there were three places growing up. For me as a New Yorker, that there was Coney Island, right, which I grew up about 5 stops from Coney Island. There was Times Square,
right,
and there was the Seaport. And for me, they're very connected in a lot of ways through their authenticity. Do you know what I mean? That even years ago, they were the last sort of remnants of an earlier time, an older world. Obviously, the Seaport is a port of the new world, basically. I mean, the oldest neighborhood, and the history of the Seaport would be significant, but also just even through this, 50s, 60s, 70s in art and culture, and what was going on there, and Times Square. I mean, even as a kid, like, I would. I to this day I still miss it. I try to explain to people who wouldn't. There was a smell when you got off the train that was indescribable, and was probably like part like caramel of some kind, or part sex of some kind, part roasted nuts separate from the sex. But it was just this amazing, like, exciting smell that I is gone. It's been literally washed out of New York, scrubbed and washed out of New York City. And it was a scary place, I mean, I was as a kid. I'm I can't believe I'm going to mention this, but I was a bit into. There was a magic shop in Times Square so when I was like 12 years old, I would, like, sneak on the train, and go to this thing. It was incredible. Like, scared out of my mind, but it was exciting. When I get off at, like, types, it's just like bad. Like, if my mother was alive, she would probably, if my parents knew, hopefully my children won't listen to that. It was a scary thing, but it was. And I used to say for years that it was the most real place on earth.
Sure, yeah.
Do you know what I mean? As scary as it was, and it was something thrilling. Not like the bad part. It was just something about it. I mean, the old theaters, the history of the old theaters.
Would you go for movies too? Because that was a lot of people.
Yeah,
went for
totally.
Movies,
Yeah,
right?
totally. You would go. You'd go on a Saturday. You'd fear for your life that somebody was going to, like, stick a knife in the back of your neck or something. But you would see, like, whatever. You'd see, like, Star Wars and then 2 other movies. For like $5 or something.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Nice.
But there was all these old incredible theaters that a lot of them were torn down. Like in the 90s, it started to go away. And I used to walk around Times Square with a tape recorder.
Nice,
and record,
really?
and record, like, just I wanted to. to this day, I regret. Like I always had these. You know, you have a list of things that you want to do in your life. You know, so I always wanted to. I wish I filmed more of Times Square. I wish I recorded more of it. And the same thing with Coney Island. You know, I mean, I would go. My dad would take me there as a kid. I was obsessed with it. That's why Siren was such a huge thing to me. I mean, to be able to go out to Siren and see, you know, bands that you loved, and you know, I mean, it was nothing like it. You know,
and just stand on that street, on those two streets.
You know, my children love, you know, Coney Island. They're 5 and 7. I take them. They have magic out at the museum there.
Right.
You know, and I take them all the time.
That's right.
It's you know, it's at the Coney Island Museum, you know.
I remember I ran into you on the beach one time. Do you remember that?
Well, it was Rockaway.
Yeah, that's different. But it was like, rarely do you just like bump into someone.
No, that's really true. Some years Rockaway, everyone's there.
Yeah, right.
But it's not that much of a stretch. But anyway, so Coney Island, Times Square, and the Seaport, and you know, there's just a connection for those three places to me of like this the last of New York, you know. Yeah. And Times Square is ruined, you know. I don't, you know, I'm not one of those people that wishes it, you know, I wish, you know, you could fear for your life again. But, you know, they could have done it, you know what I mean? Like,
there could have been some preservation.
There could have been a lot of preservation, and there could have been a lot of creativity, and it could have been a better way to do it, you know what I mean? And it's, you know, the whole Giuliani thing, I mean, whoever sold it out, I mean...
Well, I think MTV, too, kind of played a certain role, right, when they were in there.
I think I blame MTV for a lot.
Like, you know, TRL and all that shit, just like that fucked it all up.
Like the current administration. I mean, you know, if you go back, I mean, what's the first reality? Who got everyone started on this crap? You know what I mean?
Reality TV. Yeah,
you know,
the real world.
Just, you know, sold out. You know, so yeah, we don't want to talk about that too much, but but yeah, I mean, they could have, and Coney Island. You know, I mean, it's common themes. You know, redevelopment. You know, it's Thor properties versus the I mean, Coney Island. I mean, we can go on hours and hours and hours about the.
Do you feel like that's still like there is still some semblance of it that exists to a small?
I always say, unlike time. I mean, there's still parts of Times Square that you if you look for, you can find. You know.
You might need a magnifying glass.
Jimmy's Corner.
Yeah.
Right. Mm-hmm. Would be a place, you know, that feels, you know, and there's still some restaurants and things like that, but you know, it's just kind of not, you know, I spent a lot of time there during the New York Comedy Festival week and stuff, but it's not the same. And then there's Coney Island. I joke all the time that like. It's nothing like it was, but it's still the greatest place on earth. It's still Coney Island.
Yeah.
You can't take the Coney Island out of Coney Island.
Yeah.
I mean, I suppose at a certain point you can, but it's still an amazing place.
Have you been to the Coney Island Amphitheater? Have you been there yet?
No.
I went to the very first show that they had, which was last summer. It wasn't that long ago. It was like Steel Pulse and Ziggy Marley and stuff. I mean. That was interesting. I will only say that just because it was that particular show, because it was such a mix of cultures too.
Yeah.
It was like Barbados and Jamaica.
Well, which I love.
The Caribbean. That was really cool. Now I don't know the long term effects of the Coney Island Amphitheater.
You know, we did this. I did this thing out in Coney Island with Burger Records.
Right.
You know, the MCU Park, which was crazy. We are discussing this summer.
So there's a chance that's going to happen.
There's a yes. Not there though. In Coney Island, but not there. But that's all I'll say. Nothing's been announced yet, but we're definitely still working with Burger. Those guys are cool. You know?
Yeah, I went to college with Sean.
Oh, there you go. Okay,
love that guy.
It's a great thing, and. So there's plans there. So it'll be out in Coney Island. But the amphitheater, Live Nation had contacted me after because they saw that we were doing that. I can guarantee that they had no idea what they just saw us doing like a rock show at MCU Park. It's like, oh hey, you want to do it here? It's like you kind of don't really, you know what I mean? You don't really understand, but this doesn't even fit here. At MCU Park, never mind, like at your thing, which would probably cost $6 million. But But anyway, yeah. So kind of excited about that. But yeah. So that's why the seaport. That's why all these things kind of make sense in a little.
Yeah.
In
I
some
can
ways.
see that it
trying
does
to preserve the authenticity of
Exactly.
the place and the history, and I think that's what the Seaport Music Festival had, does reflect in a lot of ways. And there's the redevelopment there. I think it's going to be great. It's going to be the 4,000 seat capacity theater on the roof of the Pier 17 of the new Pier 17 building. Yeah.
Oh, I had no idea.
It'll have really fantastic views.
I would think so.
And the museum there is doing some really great things. The ship that you spoke of, the Peking was there for many, many years, and that finally went back to Germany because it didn't have any it didn't have any actual historic significance to New York, New York history. I mean, it does have it. One could argue because it's been there for decades, but not in the way that the Waiver Tree that's there now, which it just went through a $13 million renovation, which is beautiful. It's really amazing.
Have you been on it?
I have, yeah.
Cool.
It's gorgeous. And
there's a couple other historic boats there too, right? It's
not just the Ambrose and the Waiver Tree, and there's the Pioneer. But the museum is an amazing place, and
I gotta check that. I don't think I've been before.
Yeah, I mean, part of my obsession with the Seaport was a book of short stories called Up in the Old Hotel, which was written by Joseph Mitchell, who wrote for New Yorker magazine for many years. And in the 50s, he befriended this guy Louis Molinari, who owned Sloppy Louie's, which was a very well-known restaurant right on South Street. And it's an incredible story, and it's just about how when Louis took over the building, that he never went above the second floor, and the third and fourth floor was where the hotel, the Fulton Ferry Hotel was.
Wow!
Right, and then there was another hotel, Suites Hotel, that was just connected to it around the corner, and so that one day Joseph Mitchell talks him into going. I mean, it's really amazing. There's a lot of great short stories in it.
I want to check that out.
Stories about McSorley's and about the Seaport, areas, South Street in general. But it's called Up in the Old Hotel, and that's one of the main stories. It's really amazing. And so, long story, but what ended up happening in around 2008 was that there's an annex. There was an annex to Sloppy Louie's. Sloppy Louie's closed in 1998. That's how long it was around. And we used to use this, the ground floor. So what happened was after Louis left, Heartland Brewery came in around 99, 2000, something like that. And they broke up the space. And so they could never rent out the annex to Sloppy Louie's. And we started using it as just a place to store stuff. And then one day I went, and I used to go upstairs, and I would work from there because there was a window you could look out onto the pier.
Oh, so there was a room, like an old...
Yeah. So I went to the powers that be at the time it was General Growth at the time, the Seaport, I would call the Seaport office. And I talked them into letting me use it as an office, and it became my office for 5 or 6 years, Sloppy Louie's. And
amazing.
It was totally amazing. And so we were on the second floor, and then downstairs we kept all production stuff. So we would just roll lights and everything out from downstairs. I mean, anything you ever needed, just across the pier for any event or whatever,
Right.
I mean, they would call me all the time. Hey, we need, this, that, the other thing. And my wife at the time, she had a food background, and she worked for City Bakery as a general manager. She left there and started working with me, and we started doing more food events. And the Seaport approached her specifically to start the Fulton Stall Market at the old fish stalls.
Sweet.
And that became a whole thing. And we used to do this series there, the Sound Bites with Bill Paris from Brooklyn
Vegan. Yes.
So a lot of great bands have played there.
Yeah.
John from Tobin and I have done a number of things there. That was kind of a fun thing.
Yeah, you did great by doing multiple style of shows in different little places along that community.
Activating the spaces, the old West Claiborne space, which is where we did second stage at the East Village Radio thing, and Four Knots as well. And I've done a million things in there, from comedy to the Moth.
The Moth.
We did a thing there. Cool. That was cool. Alan Vega was part of that. That was insane. Yeah.
I mean, even just recently when I went and saw that the comedian dude was in that Crab Shack bar restaurant. Now this is obviously probably not one that you use. It's like, it's there. It's in the Seaport.
That's a forgettable evening.
But
there's a number of those. Yeah, that happens. See, I tell you, I mean, I'm used to,
Right. I mean when you're doing stuff that frequently, they're not all like.
Or when you're trying new things, I mean, we had we sort of reignited the Fulton Stall Market, and we started Little Water Radio in the back.
Yeah, so that's the radio station that's actively there right now.
And then we had one of the owners of Fresh Salt. She and I started with another partner. Her started the Market Bar. So we had like the bar, and there was the market. And then there was, this performance space in the back, and Little Water Radio. Lemon Twigs played, and all these bands,
right?
And Cannon's Walk was there. It was sort of beautiful. But
what was the venue? What was the venue that was right next to the radio stations where we had Weeknight played there? Like 2 years ago now. It's basically next door. And it's just had a little tiny bar, and then there was like...
That was the market.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, do you remember when you and I remember my idea of... these are the things that sometimes don't work out.
Right.
On Friday nights after the Seaport Music Festival, there was a crazy little divey place on the end of the pier that the museum owns on 16 called Skipper's.
Yeah, Skipper's.
And so I wanted it to be like the sort of best free outdoor dive bar, which it could have been, except... It rained every single show that we did. So the idea was that you've probably blocked this out of your mind, but this is kind of around the time that we first sort of met. I think you were working with Michelle at Panache, right? And the idea was that after the Seaport Music Festival ended at 9:00, we'd continue to party down the other pier at Skipper's. But Skipper's didn't really get it. They were serving those weird, like, those drinks with the beer shoved in them. With those,
it was like a margarita with like a beer.
Coors beer, like really horrendous sort of things. They kind of weren't. But like if they had listened to me and they'd found like a great taco vendor. What year was this? Was like 2012, 13 or something?
Yeah, I mean, definitely
and,
11,
at that
12.
time, if they had served that audience and it didn't rain, it might have.
The rain was a big killer.
The rain was a big killer. So there was no roof. To the stage, we were doing it like DIY, it's
big time,
and
I remember a few rained out.
I think every single one. I think I had 4 booked, and every single one rained. It was fantastic, but it's not nearly as crazy as the one year the Seaport installed an ice rink on the pier, and I decided to do shows, the Seaport Music Winter Festival in January and February.
Very adventurous.
Oh, totally, yeah. Every band got a bottle of whiskey as part of the, I have pictures. I'm trying to remember who played. Well, do you know Mike Bell and all these guys, Joe Jarowitz from Dirty on Purpose? They had this thing called Neckbeard Telecaster.
Yeah, I remember that.
They were one of the first bands to play the thing. And I remember Joe's a bit of a artist and stuff. I remember he did like a fake New York Post cover, like "Idiot Band Freezes to Death on Stage." That was the poster for the event. But,
the whiskey is great because if they have to get blackout drunk in order to forget the whole experience.
To survive, to play, to keep the heaters didn't work. It was like just a really bad. I mean, the idea was to sort of do like you'd go ice skating and listen to your favorite indie rock band. You know what I mean? Like that was the idea. Like I saw it as like some kind of like like the Buddy Holly movie where like they're playing the roller skating rink. I sort of saw it as some kind of crazy version of that, but.
That's definitely a crazy version of that.
Yeah, that didn't really. I think I canceled. I had like 2 more shows. Like I remember one night sitting in a tent with the sound crew, and I was just like, "Let's go home. This is like the dumbest thing I've ever done. We're not doing this anymore. We're canceling. I can't do this to the band, because part of the problem, which was not on me, was that nobody was going to the ice rink. You know what I mean? So
so you need people at the ice rink to be there. For the show.
And then what would happen is that the people that were coming to see the shows that. They were standing they weren't ice skating. They were like, so now you're standing on the pier, freezing your ass. It didn't work. You're supposed to ice skate. You're supposed to ice skate and listen to Neckbeard Telecaster or whoever else played.
Did you ever shout that at the audience? That
Probably.
You need to be ice skating.
But they were so cold they didn't hear me.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, something I definitely wanted to, I'd be remiss to not talk about this with you is the New York Comedy Festival.
Well, it's funny because, I've always felt that. I always loved, again, sort of the New York thing, and sort of totally unconnected. So the New York Comedy Festival is producing Caroline's on Broadway, right?
Okay.
And so Caroline's, so I didn't know her. She's quite a bit older than me, but she actually is from Marine Park too.
Really?
She's from Brooklyn, yeah. And she, the Caroline's was at the Seaport.
Really?
Yeah, I didn't know this. So this was like in the 80s or something like that, or late 80s, early 90s. I have a show on Little Water Radio, and I had this incredible guy, Eddie Brill. He was a booker for. I know I'm not answering your question yet, but I'll get there. A booker for David Letterman for like 17 years.
Amazing.
Yeah, and he went to Emerson College. He started. He went to school with Dennis Leary and Adam Roth, who sadly passed away a year or two ago. Mm. Adam was a very well-known New York City musician, well-loved, respected, but he was in Dennis Leary, had the Asshole Band, right? Mm. And so Adam and his brother Charlie, who is a very good friend of mine. Anyway, so Adam, Dennis, Eddie Brill, and another guy, and Norman Lear, who also went to Emerson College. They started. Wow. They started like the Emerson comedy troupe, and
But Norman Lear is much older than these guys.
Yeah, but he was instrumental. He helped them to start. Like you can go and major in comedy at Emerson College.
Wow.
Yeah,
I had no idea.
I don't think that exists anywhere else. Yeah. Maybe you get a scholarship too if you're funny enough. I don't know.
Wow.
But you can.
Interesting.
But yeah. So anyway, but anyway, I interviewed him a couple of weeks ago, and we talked about all the great people that had. Performed at the Seaport at Pier 17. A bit like there's an old Debbie Gibson video, right, that was filmed at the Seaport, and there's one shot. She's like up on the second floor of the old Pier 17 building. We turn the camera. She turns around and like you can see the old Carolines.
Do you remember the song?
No, fuck no.
You just can't access the Debbie Gibson.
No, I can't. I still can't think of Tad's record. But anyway, or my name. But anyway. So, but like Robert Schimmel had filmed, one of his great. He's passed away too. He's one of the amazing comedies, like classic comedy up there. And this was like he filmed like an HBO. This was like when it wasn't like commonplace. You know what I mean?
HBO specials.
Like George Carlin,
right?
And I don't know, maybe one or two other people.
Yeah, comedy was definitely in a very different place.
Yeah, and so that happened. Like the Seaport doesn't even know that happened. Do you know what I mean? I talked to them. Like they have no idea. I mean, there's one person that's been there for like 20-something years who remembers Caroline.
What was do you remember? What's the actual location of the old Carolines? Is it something else now?
Well, it's gone.
Right. The building itself.
The building itself is gone. It was the Pier 17 building on the second floor.
Wow.
And,
upstairs.
Huh?
Upstairs.
Yeah, upstairs. But anyway, but that was kind of a fascinating thing. But how I got there was through my affiliation with Hot 97 and MS Communications, and I started doing the Hot 97 comedy show at the Theater of the Garden, which I still exists, still do it today. It's actually April 1.
But your affiliation with Hot 97 really started at the World Trade Center.
Yeah, doing the shows and from the music end of it. And then...
What kind of shows were they bringing to the World Trade Center? R&B stuff? It wasn't hip-hop shows, was it?
No. There may sneak one or two in every now and then, but it was mostly classic.
You never had Biggie down there at World Trade Center?
No, unfortunately. But I lived on a street. Anyway.
For Biggie?
Yeah, not at the time. Just like 3 or 4 years ago.
From his... Okay,
yeah, they renamed it. Anyway, not Biggie, but whatever his name is.
Christopher Wallace.
Thank you.
So getting back to the...
Wallace Way. But anyway,
okay.
so the Hot 97 Club, I met a gentleman named Louis Ferranda, who is the general manager, talent booker of Caroline's. He's like discovered everyone that you know.
I'm sure.
Today.
Yeah.
And so he was like, hey, I've got this little festival I want you to, help me with. And that was like in 2004, and so I got involved with the New York Comedy Festival, and at the time it was actually bigger in some ways. Like now the New York Comedy Festival is like a lot of different properties that are sort of folded into the umbrella, right?
It's pretty broad.
It's pretty broad now. The whole week is tons of shows the whole week, but the actual like Caroline's, my involvement produced shows. There were more back then. There were shows at Lincoln Center. There were shows at Hammerstein Ballroom. There were shows at BAM. There were shows at theater at Madison Square Garden, the Arena.
They're all produced under the banner of Caroline's.
Under the New York Comedy Festival, which is run by Caroline's on Broadway.
Right. Back then too, Caroline's was a more prominent force in comedy and as a club in New York.
I think it's still
the leader.
It's still the leader. Yeah.
For ticketed stuff now, I mean, obviously stuff like the Comedy Cellar.
They're not the only game in town.
Right.
You know what I mean?
But for headlining comedy shows.
Yeah, I think you know what? I think if you're a comedian and you don't play Caroline's, that's like not playing CBGBs or something. Which would be kind of impossible now. But you get what I'm saying?
Yeah, definitely.
That would but it's been a great it's been an incredible thing, incredible shows, and I've watched a lot of people like Louis and stuff like that. Those City Center shows were amazing. I mean, because
and you hooked me up with that one. I
really
appreciate
that was a lot of fun. It was no problem.
Louis C.K. at City Center.
Yeah, it was doing like 2 nights. That was actually the year of the hurricane, because the very last night was canceled.
Yes, I remember.
So but it was like when you wanted no one backstage. You didn't even want people at the theater backstage. You just like wanted me sitting on a stool and no one else.
Just you and him.
Just me and him and the opener. Right. And he would get there at 3 minutes to 8. I'd be like a nervous wreck, even though he did it all the time. He'd just walk in, walk out. He started just announcing himself, which was hilarious, And,
he would announce himself on the mic before he got on stage.
Yeah. Nice. And he did a whole routine on the mic. It's just it was fantastic. But watching him do the same stuff over and over, I really got it was amazing to watch,
Yeah.
It was like watching, and I've been known to say this, so I hate to be redundant, but but it was kind of like watching jazz or something. Do you know what I mean? Because he would deconstruct his, and then you'd watch it being put back together, and and just I'm a huge fan. I just think
he's a master.
There are those people that sort of transcend, mediocrity. You know what I mean? And they're able to shift the molecules in the air, and it's something that not everyone can do, right?
Right.
I remember years ago seeing this a version of a Doll's House on Broadway. I had a girlfriend or somebody whose brother got us second row seats or something, and I went to see this, and I was at that point, I remember thinking, this is not everyone could do that. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
There's a lot of people that can act, but what she did was just, you could smell it in the air. There was something changed. You know what I mean? She shifted reality of something. You know what I mean? It was otherworldly. You know what I mean? And that's, I see that in music, I see that in comedy, I see that in, you know what I mean? And that's the stuff that's exciting. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's what's kind of missing in kind of so many things. I mean, not to sound like the old geezer, sort of back in my day, because I think there's plenty of new. There's nothing excites me more than new music. That's always been the thing. And
but to transcend is a rare commodity.
Yeah, it is, and there's not a lot of people that can do it.
So was your first time working with Louis, was those City Center shows?
No.
You guys
Louis had done, the first time I saw Louis was doing the Dennis, back in the early days of the New York Comedy Festival, Dennis Leary would do these shows, Dennis Leary and Friends.
Oh, cool.
And those were the best. I miss those, because Dennis would just invite all the, Greg Giraldo and Robert Schimmel and Patrice O'Neill, who's also dead, unfortunately.
Incredible comic in the same vein as Louis.
Yeah, funny guy. They just did Bill Burr, another great. They just did this, the Patrice O'Neill, it's been the 5th year at City Center. Tribute to sort of memorial show. Very well loved, very funny. But and then that was the first time I saw Louis, man. And he was always a super nice guy, super cool. But he was one of those guys I watched working on it. Do you know what I mean? Like a lot of guys were just funny. Patrice O'Neal, just funny. If he was sitting here, he's funny. You know what I mean? I'm sure when he went, like, you know, he's like one of those guys, just funny. He can't help being funny.
Yeah.
He's always on. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And but not in a bad way, you know.
Sure.
And but I feel like Louis was like a crafts, you know, like you could always see his brain going, like just working on it. If that makes any sense whatsoever.
Yeah. I mean, you can tell. Just look at how how Louis the show was written, and the way.
Yeah.
Obviously, if he's editing it, filming it, and editing it as well, then he's approaching it.
I'm a little, you know, I've always anyway. I don't want to get into sort of any controversial things, but
What's that?
No, I said I don't want to.
Oh, okay.
But
well, you were about to say something.
No, I know this. I don't know. This jury's out on some things with him and his sort of personal life, which is always.
Oh, I didn't know.
You know, well, look, the greatest example of that. So, just going on the comedy festival for a moment. About 3 years ago, Bill Cosby at Carnegie Hall, right?
Right.
You know, this was like the last show of that year, right? It's Carnegie Hall. He actually. He was going blind, you know, he couldn't see and all that stuff. And he wanted to make a phone call to this guy, the guy who originally booked him at Carnegie Hall like 50 years ago.
Wow.
Right? Like Norm somebody, some guy in L.A., right?
Wow.
And he said, so you're gonna take your phone, I'm gonna give you the number, you're gonna call. I was like, Bill, I can't come out on stage.
Oh, he wanted to call him on stage in front of everyone.
Yeah. He's like, well, I'll just make you part of the show.
Wow, man.
So I was like nervous, you know, just nervous. I didn't have to do anything but make the phone, you know. So anyway, there we go. He's announced. He walks out. I walk out with Bill Cosby, right, behind him. Right. You know, the place is sold out. I like sit, you know, he sits down in a chair, and I'm like standing off to the side, and he does like 5 or 10 minutes.
Oh my God!
And I'm like standing there. I'm just standing there. He made a couple of jokes about me, like I was like police or something, whatever, some silly thing. So then because he was just going on, just talking,
right?
Because that was what he did, right? So then he goes, all right, so come here. So we call, and it was really incredible because he calls a guy, and we had set it up with the guy's wife, daughter, and all this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
The guy's like 100, you know, whatever.
Wow.
And he goes, hey, Norm, it's Bill. I don't know if his name is Norm. I'm just making it up, right? What else would an agent from 50 years ago do? Right?
Right.
So, I call him, Bill, how you doing? He goes, I'm here at Carnegie Hall. And the place is losing their mind, you know what I mean? Like, they're just going crazy. It's like, yeah, you booked me here 50 years ago. We're all still here, you know. Everyone's still here. And it was very sweet, and it was amazing. But anyway, the point of the story was that, so my wife came to the show that night, and I never, ever take pictures with anyone, like hardly ever.
Okay.
3 times I'll tell you about that that are interesting, I think, you know. And but this was one night. Like there's, you know, me and my wife taking with Bill Cosby. So the next day, so that night I go home and I post a picture of somebody had taken a picture of me on stage with Bill Cosby.
Yeah.
And it was amazing. You can't get any like that's amazing, right?
At Carnegie Hall.
Fucking Carnegie Hall, Bill Cosby, there I am, boom, right?
Right.
So I post this on Facebook, right? The next morning, the next day, the whole thing breaks.
Right.
That week, I delete the photo from fucking Facebook. Like unbelievable. I also actually have a very funny story about Hannibal Buress. I may or may not tell you.
Okay.
It's something that we could all relate to. But anyway, the other photos we were talking about earlier, I met Dick Cavett backstage.
Did you?
Yeah.
At the New York Comedy Festival?
I did, yeah. He was there to see Bill Maher at the Beacon Theater.
Cool.
And I helped him out. And he gave me a hug. And I love Dick Cavett. Like, just...
That was your guy?
Well, it's just like, you know, it's one of those, he's...
Yeah, I mean, childhood memories, I'm sure.
Childhood memories, but also, I mean, just, you want to, like, if you're going to waste time on YouTube, go back and watch Dick Cavett, you know, interviews. They're, like, amazing. You know what I mean? Like, interviews in general back then were actual interviews, you know.
Yeah, definitely.
It wasn't, like, 3 minutes long, and I got a new movie, but...
and his guests were always, like, so...
Yeah, he spent, like, a week with Lennon and John Lennon and Yoko Ono. I mean, it's just, like, unbelievable. And... and then the other one was one of the most amazing human beings that ever lived, George Shapiro.
Yeah.
Yes. Do you know who George Shapiro is?
I do. George Shapiro. Yeah. Tell the audience.
All right. Tell the audience. I love that. George Shapiro discovered Jerry Seinfeld's manager.
Yeah.
He also discovered Andy Kaufman, right? And if you go on YouTube and he tells a story about seeing Andy Kaufman for the first time, and also when Andy Kaufman, do you know there was a show called Taxi?
Of course,
right?
yes,
Okay.
of course.
And so Andy Kaufman didn't want to do television, and George talked him into it, right? He said, look, they want you to do this, to be a lot of money, whatever, blah, blah, blah. And he said, okay, I'll do it if Tony Clifton gets to do 3 episodes. Now, Tony Clifton is an alter ego,
of course,
right? So, and no one can know that is me.
And at that time, I don't think they didn't know.
No, they didn't know
because he did his own. Tony Clifton had his own act too.
That's right.
In clubs.
That's right. So anyway, George Shapiro telling the story is like one of the greatest things on the internet. Like, it's just amazing. And anyway, just to finish the story, so they go, okay, the producers go, okay, and so Tony Clifton shows up the first day with like 2 prostitutes, and he's drunk out of his mind. Andy didn't drink, but like he's drunk, he's like in character, and so the producer like go to George and they go to Andy like, we got to fire Tony Clifton. He's like, okay, but you have to do it in front of everyone, right? Judd Hirsch, all this, all these people, and so he goes, So you go, okay. So he fires him, and Tony Clifton like tears up loses his fucking mind, cursing and tearing up the place. And George is filming it the whole time. Anyway, at a certain point, Tony Clifton storms out of the studio, and George runs out the back door and meets Andy around the corner. And Andy just runs up to him and says, "That was the greatest moment of my life. This is I want to do this for the rest of my life." And and whenever I watch George telling a story, like I tear up. It's just great.
He's kind of a wild dude too, right? Wild.
George or Andy?
George.
No. He's. I did this Jerry Seinfeld thing at the Rose Theater, which was amazing. And I had my friend Chris, and I tell him all these stories, and George told a story. But the great thing about George Shapiro, and this is the great thing about managers, there's a reason why he has been, Jerry Seinfeld, long cord, like a mic with a long cord, a glass like when you were a kid. He never tells you what that is, but somehow you know. What a bottle of water, half cracked, and there's a couple other things. But he'll come to the theater and make sure that that's it. It's very, very specific.
Right.
You can't fuck it up, right? But he's a beautiful guy, and that night, I remember saying to Louis Ferranda, imagine if George is actually God, because he's this little old guy who's just unbelievable, and but just anyway, I've been wanting to interview him on Little Water Radio.
Oh, you have to.
It's the greatest thing. I mean, he's just wonderful. So I have a photo with him as well.
Was he accommodating to take a photo?
Yeah, of course. I mean, whatever. He's a sweet old man. He's a sweet, amazing guy that is responsible for two of the the biggest geniuses of comedy. I mean, Andy Kaufman was. I mean, the dude was punk rock, man. I mean, just he was a shit. I mean, we wouldn't have half the things that we have without Andy Kaufman.
No, not at all. And I think he exists
half
on
the
some
great things,
Sure,
and Jerry Seinfeld. I mean, forget it,
Yeah, absolutely. So it's interesting. I mean, to contrast your comedy work with the music stuff, because the world of comedy in itself obviously is it can be so involving too, and it's a giant industry. It's totally separate from music. I mean, they obviously intermingle with one another. So do you how do you...
They totally intermingle. I mean, I think... Right. I mean, first of all, just a comment. I would say that most musicians are frustrated comedians, and there's a lot of musicians, comedians that are frustrated. Whatever I said first.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Bill Burr, I mean, when he did The Garden, he had to get a drum kit. He just wanted to play drums during the day.
Oh yeah,
he just wanted. It wasn't like the audio companies. They were so confused. It was it's not part of the show.
Yeah,
he just wants to invite his buddies. They want to play at the Garden. He just wants to play.
Were they set up on stage?
Yeah, they're set up on stage during the sound check.
Right.
But what's a comedian sound check? Hello, Jackie.
Yeah.
Take my wife, please, and that's the end of it.
Right.
But yeah, that sounds great. Thanks. 5 minutes.
Yeah.
But he had
now I'm going to play drums for.
But he wanted to play.
Right.
He wanted to play Led Zeppelin songs at Madison Square Garden. So it's a lot of fun. Could we just take a break for a second? Yeah.
Okay.
David Steinberg was another great sort of. Unfortunately, I didn't take a picture with David Steinberg, but he was. So I was obsessed with The Odd Couple as a kid. It was a point in time before TV really changed when there was shows that were in syndication were on like 8 times a day.
Right.
And I would like wake up in the morning and watch an episode of The Odd Couple, and then at lunchtime, I would go home for lunch and like when I was in school, right? I'm talking about not when I was working.
Right.
And I would watch The Odd Couple. And then when you got home from school, there was like 2 episodes on after school. And then there was one at like 11 o'clock or 11:30. And I was just obsessed with, because it was New York, and plus it was amazing. I mean, Tony Randall is like one of the greatest, character actors that ever lived. The Honeymooners, Art Carney, Bill from Freaks and Geeks. I mean, these are the and but it's the Comedy Festival allowed me to sort of meet a lot of these, because I love TV and I love movies, and sort of meet a lot of these people. And Steinberg would do these. The last one he did was Billy Crystal, so at Town Hall. So it'd be like a talk with, he would interview, like it would be a conversation with Larry David or a conversation with Billy Crystal.
Right.
And
cool.
Listening to these people, particularly, I mean, Larry David, of course, is a whole other thing. He would talk mostly about Seinfeld and about his show and about all this kind of stuff, which was amazing.
Yeah.
But the Billy Crystal one, and who I'm never really sure if I'm like a big fan or not, but his history in television is undeniable. I mean, the people that he knew, and it was a lot of stuff about Robin Williams. They were obviously great friends.
Yeah.
And he told this great story about Robin Williams in Germany, and the interviewer asked him, "Why don't you think there's any funny people in Germany?" And he quickly said, "Because you killed them all."
Ha!
Yeah, which was an amazing thing to sort of hear. But he had a lot of great stories, and Groucho Marx, and the David Steinberg, the Dick Cavett Groucho Marx stuff is amazing. If you want
must
to
watch,
in.
I will.
Yeah, must watch the interviews. Groucho Marx, unbelievable. Unbelievable.
So
these are people that are not mediocre. These are people that shifted the molecules.
Right. But they're from another. They're just
that created everything that we know.
That's what makes it
humor.
Right. And we obviously propelled them to a certain place because of that too. But
and if you go back and look, I mean, you realize why. You realize why. Why people are revealed. Who they are. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like what and why they've been given this place. Most of them.
Right.
You could probably come up with a few people that were given this place in history that maybe, I don't know, didn't warrant as much. I don't know.
Sure.
But certainly, I mean, Groucho Marx, I mean, it's genius,
Yeah. Yes, of course.
Charlie Chaplin, he's an amazing composer, filmmaker, comedian, all this stuff. It's amazing. But anyway, David Steinberg was in the Odd Couple episodes. He was like, they would always have these cameos of people, of famous people that would play themselves. It was like friends with Baryshnikov or Rudolf Nureyev or something,
Uh-huh.
And anyway, they're on. But I remember this. That's why I was excited, kind of meeting David Steinberg too. Not because of all his years of talk show and personality, but because of his association with the Odd Couple.
So did you just start drilling him with questions
of
about
course,
that?
Of course, it's fun. I mean,
he was forthcoming about his experience.
Yeah, of course. I mean, I'm not the only person.
And also you're you're the organizer for the New York Comedy Festival too. There's a reason why they want to share this stuff with you. You have to admit you're put in a certain special position.
That's right.
If Louis wants you backstage,
if I ran into him on the street, I have a feeling that most of them would be just as gracious. But because I'm literally going, Mr. Steinberg, you have 5 minutes to be, you know what I mean?
You have 5 minutes. So tell me really quickly about that. That's what. No, I'm being you there for a second.
Oh, right.
You have 5 minutes before you have to
you're chatting with them at soundcheck, or you're waiting for the crew to build something or do something, and you have a moment with them, or do you want something to eat, or whatever it is.
Right. So what is that? So you've done for comedy stuff. I mean, you've gone to the biggest rooms in New York City. I mean, you've done the Garden, right? You've done the Apollo.
That's a nice theater.
Carnegie Hall.
Carnegie Hall, Avery Fisher Hall. I mean, all of them, you know,
Yeah.
all of them. But the Beacon's probably one of my favorites. It's just a beautiful theater.
Yeah.
You know.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, wonderful.
And the Stand Up for Heroes event is pretty amazing. It's with the Woodruff Foundation. Bob and Lee Woodruff. He's an ABC journalist that was wounded in Iraq and came back, and they started this foundation which raises millions of dollars for wounded. You know, to funding goes to acclimating soldiers back into everyday life through injuries, and they
how many of those have you produced?
This was the 10th year.
Wow.
Yeah. Springsteen's always part of it. He's friends with them, and so he plays 2 or 3 songs, and then he'll auction off a guitar or a jacket.
How does the run of the night work?
Motorcycle.
Like, do you
well,
have
it's
to like
stand up for? What do you mean?
Do you have to? Technically and booking wise, are you the one that's putting it all on paper for them? Or?
No. I'm just doing production for it. There's a gentleman, Andrew Fox, Caroline's partner, who does. They and the Woodruff Foundation, it depends, but.
Right.
Or Louis Ferrando will book some of the comedians. I mean, like this year was the 10th anniversary. It was Seinfeld and Louis and Jim Gaffigan, I think, and one other. But in the past, I mean, it's Robin Williams. That was an amazing one. I mean, over the years.
Have you met him? Did you meet him?
Yeah, well, he did the Stand Up for Heroes thing.
Right.
I mean, it's again like the show itself raises probably like $8 to $10 million or something.
It's incredible.
There was Roger Waters did a thing which was kind of unbelievable. He did he had like a band like G. Smith and some other sort of ringers, but the band was mostly made up of wounded veterans.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Like he would go down to Walter Reed and find these people who could sing and play guitar and all whatever, gospel choir. And I remember a night. I went to SIR to watch a rehearsal.
Oh, cool!
And there's no chance you're not going to cry. Like it's just amazing.
Right.
Watching them do, knocking on heaven's door or something.
I mean,
ridiculous. You know what I mean? But I remember this drummer Dom. I forget his last name, but he had it's like lost like 3 limbs, basically, and he's like drummer.
Wow.
And I remember the week before talking to him. He lived down in Florida, and I remember I was in my bathroom because my kids were watching TV, and I was in the bathroom so I could talk to him. It was a Saturday afternoon,
right.
And I remember this guy was so full, he's like, "No, dude," I thought he had like a special kid. He's like, "No, man, I rigged this whole thing. No, don't worry about whatever you got there." And he was just so amazing, and I mean, I was just crying thinking about my kids, and just like this guy's amazing. It's a very emotional show. It's just. It's very nonpartisan. It's a beautiful thing about it.
Yeah,
there are no politics.
Well, when you do those kind of philanthropic type shows,
and remember, this is like John Stewart has done it a million times.
Yeah, I mean,
he actually got very political that night. I mean, the comedians themselves who say things, but
sure.
In terms of the event itself, it doesn't represent. It's all about these people who sacrifice everything.
Yeah.
Their lives,
and
wounded, they're burned, and they all come. They have them come to the event. It's a miraculous thing that they do, and they're really wonderful people. But
wow.
But yeah, I sorry.
No. I'm just thinking about that. But I also it just reminds me that you have done a lot of events like that where they're large scale benefits. Where you can skirt the politics of a basic deal structure and in dealing with stuff where people come nonpartisan is the way you say it, and there's just something so rewarding in doing that stuff. I've done some of those things too. For Jonathan Tobin, I did a big one for, and it makes this kind of work as far as like a talent buyer or a promoter or even as a booking agent there's some small respite to all the bullshit that comes with the industry.
Yeah, it's totally true. I mean, look, like I said, I mean, bringing, there were so many favorite moments. I mean, just bringing a band I remember there was this band from Ireland, Oppenheimer, from Belfast, and they never played New York before. And like Hot Chip were playing the Seaport,
right?
And I knew there was going to be a shit ton of people there. and I was like a fan of the record. You know, they were on Bar None, this whole thing, and so Hot Chip was cool. They let me book, you know, I guess it was Tom at the time or whatever.
That was booking Hot Chip.
Yeah, and you know, so let me. Yeah, like yeah, sure. That, you know, because a lot of times, you know, people dictate what, you know.
Sure.
And that was a thrill, man. These kids, you know, they were kids. You know what I mean? Like they never played New York. I think one of them had been to New York and visited a girl or something. But they, you know, and they came and they played the Seaport Music Festival in front of like 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 people.
That's amazing.
It was totally amazing. And Metronomy, you know, came to they played the Seaport. There were probably about 1,500 people there, and a few years later, they were, you know, they were becoming huge. I was watching them, you know, in the rest of the world, and they played the, you know, of course they did the River Rock stuff as well.
River Rock
and another pier became sort of the guy who does free shows on piers,
right?
And they played, you know, I wasn't really sure about it, but that night there was 4,000 people, you know.
That's
I remember taking their manager Stephen Bass, who's from great guy, Moshi Records, and actually that last night Anna Meredith played the Babies Are Right thing, so they were Moshi was there, but Stephen wasn't. But anyway, I remember taking Stephen out on the stage before the band played. I was like, look, man. And the thing about Hudson River Park is they actually count people in.
Oh,
you
nice.
Know what I mean? So there really was like 4,000 people there.
Amazing.
And those are thrilling moments. Those are amazing moments that like you can't, you know, you just get addicted to that kind of thing. I mean, I've never made, you know, a lot of money or any money of, you know, doing the Seaport Music Festival. It's always been a labor of love, and it's more important now than ever to do these things, I think. And you know, yeah, you do things. It's like the children's thing. You know, I brought Target in to do the Children's Day thing at the Seaport for 8 years. They were a sponsor, and it was, and every time, you know, Elmo or whatever were there. You know, it's.
Right.
They Might Be Giants played one year. You know, I had the Brooklyn Philharmonic play to fireworks. You know,
wow.
I had apples in stereo. Like it was just like kind of goofy thing. Like, you know, just like no one. It's fun doing things that like, and maybe there's a good reason why nobody would do it. But like, you know, I don't know. It's like I was like, what if we get Robert Schneider to do the Apple Stereo play, and then we'll do the song Energy. And we'll have the Brooklyn Youth Chorus sing with Apples to Stereo with members of the Brooklyn Philharmonic.
And you pitch them on this.
And then to fireworks.
Right.
All right, so that's kind of fun.
Yeah.
Right? I think, you know.
How did it come off?
It was great. It was amazing, you know. Cool. I remember the year with the Brooklyn Philharmonic, like playing, you know, Handel's Royal Fireworks or whatever it was. Probably getting that wrong, like the Ted Leo record, but anyway, I cried like watching, you know, it's like, holy shit, it's amazing.
Oh yeah.
You know, 4 barges of fireworks on the East River with the Brooklyn Philharmonic.
Did you coordinate all that?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, because the Brooklyn Philharmonic was they no longer exist. They were a great organization, and it would be great if Brooklyn had that.
Yes.
You know what I mean? So I want to support that. So what can we do? They had come to the Seaport because they wanted to do something, and I went, hey guys, I remember going to the Seaport. It's like, hey, what if I went to Brooklyn Philharmonic, and what if they played on, it was like the night of, it was always the night of Children's Day, because Target would want to end with this fireworks show. It was like a $200,000 fireworks show.
Wow.
I'm like, what if we, you know, so they brought the Philharmonic, and they were like, yeah, let's do it. So yeah, I worked with the conductor and everything, and
wow,
it was exciting, man.
Yeah.
It was amazing. It was amazing.
What was the that music festival that started in China that you then Modern Sky?
Yes.
Right. So you did that for the first one was last year.
No, it's still we're doing it at Central Park.
Yeah, for the second year in a row.
This is the 4th year.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
So that's all. It basically started with just artists from China, right? Or what's the story behind that?
Well, the story is a colleague and friend of mine for many years. We met at the Seaport Music Festival because he was managing bands. He was working at Spin Art at the time, and then fast forward a few years later, he was just looking for a change in life, and he moved away. But then he came back, and he was like read about this, like things were kind of happening in China, and he just did some research, found this company. He emailed them, they're like, yeah, sure, come here. It was a great story, you know. Like he got on a plane, landed in China. Somebody met him. Nobody spoke English, And he went and he lived there for like a year, and now he's like running Modern Sky USA.
Wow.
But from years ago, we talked about there's actually a River to River program guy, because I was so convinced that we were going to make it happen, that has Modern Sky Festival at the Seaport, like 10 years ago. I don't know, maybe less. But it didn't, and then we tried it. We kept, we were going to bring Modern Sky to New York, right? And then finally, in I don't know, 4 years ago or 3 years ago, I guess, because this would be the fourth year.
Yeah.
So whatever year, we did 2 days in Central Park, and so Strawberry Music Festival in China, they always have like Western headliners.
I see. Okay.
And Chinese,
sure.
Chinese headliners, but like Prodigy and blah blah blah, whatever.
Right.
Hives and Carly Rae Jepsen, whatever.
Yeah.
Or cool stuff. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
The Hives were cool, but
Sure. It's always interesting to see who headlines out there.
Yeah, in the early days. I mean, there was there's been some amazing Blonde Redhead played. I think Yes played in the early days. But anyway, so we sort of kept that same kind of thing for the Modern Sky Festival here. Right. So the first year was Liars and the music of William Onyebor, which I'm really happy that we did. And mixed with these big Chinese bands. Amy Mann and Ted Leo, they played,
Mm-hmm.
And then the second year, we learned that we just one day Central Park and Yoko Ono. That was an amazing thing.
Cool.
Talk about like booking, like to this day. Like I would say that the show itself was a moderate success. But for me personally, you can't get any more New York history. Iconic. I can go on, right, with the fucking, Yoko Ono, who lives across the street, playing Central Park.
Yeah.
It was massive. Yeah. And it was so much fun to work on.
Is this the main lawn? Like
No, it's Rumsey Playfield. It's summer stage.
Yeah, amazing.
And I mean, I couldn't believe that was going to happen. And it was Yoko Ono with Yola Tango was the band, and Thurston Moore.
Wow.
Yeah. So that was
a true New York.
I know, that was amazing. It was totally cool, and then all these great Chinese bands, and I think I forget who else played.
Have you been out there
to China?
Yeah,
a few times. I've gone in and helped run production on the main stage with the Western artists. So I would bring a team, and we would just handle the Western artists to make sure that they had everything that they needed, and everything was communicated well.
Wow.
In both Beijing and Shanghai.
Oh,
last year was nuts. Prodigy, who insisted on like shipping all their gear to China.
Oh my god!
And tons of shit, and then they insisted on playing back to back, like one night in Beijing and then the next night in Shanghai.
Oh, what a nightmare! So you have to take all that gear from one city to the next.
Yeah, it was too far to drive. And so we set up this whole thing with rocket cargo, like with cargo. It was absolutely nuts. We left when the show ended in Beijing. Me and a few others hopped in, got in a car, followed the truck to the airport. I had 2 or 3 people at the airport, one who spoke Chinese, 2 of us to make sure everything got on the plane. And then I was at a hotel with 2 others, and then we met that morning. But what ended up, so I get to Shanghai.
At what time?
There's no, I don't know. I don't, we didn't sleep. I mean, I laid down. I didn't even take my clothes off. I laid down in the bed, went, oh shit, well, how did I get here? And
I gotta go.
Yeah, I gotta go. And then we just woke up and took a cab to the airport, got on a plane, landed in Shanghai, went straight to the venue. Everyone was there was great. Shanghai's amazing. Beijing's like China, like you picture it. Shanghai is kind of like the Austin of fucking China,
cool.
I call it.
Yeah, I've never been before.
Art museums, and it's all colorful and lights, and it's cool. And so everything was great there. And then a truck arrived, and I was like, oh, right, But then we learned that the pilot, last minute, decided that he was going to leave. He was only taking half the shipment.
Whoa.
And then it rained.
Wow.
And then the gear got stuck in Beijing, and the Prodigy, the band, got stuck in Beijing. They just drank the rest of the afternoon, and they never got to Shanghai, so it was canceled.
Holy shit!
Yeah, but it was stupid, man. It was their fault.
They need to have a buffer of some kind. You can't just do that, right? Like, I mean, as far as like,
Yes, I mean, how
why not have a day off in between to buffer for?
How much more challenging can you make it?
Right.
You're in China.
Right.
right? I mean, like we wouldn't do that here, right? Like I wouldn't say, look, we'll play. Like we wouldn't take a chance, like saying, like let's go play Canada tomorrow, right? I mean, like anything can happen.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe we would. You get my point, though.
Yeah,
I
but
mean,
it's a little different there.
You got to worry about the language. You got to have all your bases covered from anyone and everyone who's involved. That's why I was like, we got to go to the airport. We have to make sure that they understand that you have to watch each piece of gear get on that plane.
Right.
And then everyone in Shanghai is like, well, can't we just rent them? It's like, no. All this shit's programmed.
Right.
Like it's Prodigy. It's all electronic.
They got it all dialed in, so that's why they need to have. I mean, to go to the trouble, right?
To their audio, the whole thing. So anyway,
I mean, to fly all that shit into, yeah. I mean, I could now. I'm getting all worked up thinking about it.
No, it was completely ridiculous.
Well, that's amazing. Yeah, I mean, you have so many stories that I could just be asking about every individual show you've done.
I promised it wouldn't be this much, but
no, I appreciate it. I'll add a little bit. Yeah, I think this is great. I'm trying to think.
Well, look, I would just like to say that it's I'm thrilled that you're doing this kind of thing. It's cool. I've listened to a lot of them. It's been a lot of fun, and I think not a lot of people get to be interviewed to discuss what they do, and I'm not saying any of it's important, but I think that now more than ever, I've said already today that there's I've watched it over the years. We were talking about the film, the Michael Alec thing and the D. Snyder, I don't know, whatever, just Giuliani, what's happened in the city,
Times Square and all that,
Times Square and all that, and the seaport, and there's a great challenge just to be authentic, and I just hope that people, the landscape's changing, people are being bought up by bigger things, which is not necessarily bad. It's like, it's okay. I don't deny people making money. That's like a ridiculous thing. I mean, it's just a crazy thing. I'm not like some crazy, nobody should make money kind of thing. I need to have 2 children. It's like, that's fine. But, it's trying to navigate. That's why I think what you're doing is kind of important, because, if people talk about these things and talk about what they're doing, talk about why it's important, I'm sure agents talk about what excites them about certain artists and what makes it great. And I'm sure that all their favorite moments are those moments when it was something that was real and wasn't about like, how much money they made, or maybe it was, and that's okay too. But you know what I mean? Like it's just like you are doing something important. You are adding to the fabric and the culture of this city and beyond in the world and affecting it. It's just like making sure that the water is good that we drink, so that you know what I mean. It's just making sure that the food that we eat is not affect and how could we affect positive change in these things and keeping them authentic. And it's the same with doing shows. I mean, people, I've seen it change. Like free shows aren't what I'm trying to figure out what it is, and I think a lot of it is, people, when you have, there's a mandate to sort of have things be larger and bigger and more worthwhile. And then also we're also competing against people just hanging out on their couch and reading Facebook for 6 hours. I mean, that's real. Very true. That's a real thing. I mean, we all do it. You know what I mean? Like it's a very real thing. It's like, I don't want to go. You know what I mean? I just spent 5 hours getting mad at the guy I went to high school with. Why come on, honey, just call just order something from Seamless, and we'll watch Stranger Things, and it'll be fine. That's the reality. That's people do everything on their phone. That's everything. They have sex on their phone. They meet people on the phone. They talk to people. They get angry. They get happy. They get sad. They create things. They do. Everything is. Like, you don't even need to. Do you need to go to a show? I don't know. You can just watch it. On your phone. So that's a big thing. And the challenge is, and that's why I think it's more important than ever to give people something that's, I know it sounds ridiculous, but just something that's authentic and worthwhile. And whether that's in music or comedy or whatever it is, the people are still doing great things. I really believe that.
Yeah, and I think we're all on some level attracted and can really relate to stories and people's life experiences. Yeah, and I think when you get involved as deep as we have and many of our friends and colleagues in music, it's sometimes you rarely will look back and be like, oh yeah, this is kind of like what I liked when I was a kid. And
that's right.
You know, when you're like pushing through deals every day and trying to figure out what you're doing in 6 months or what you're doing in 12 months, you know, getting back to that kind of context where you can have those moments that you were talking about with the guys, with those your rare photo ops, you know, with people. Where those are like things that just have great, you know, personal value to you, that is like your own personal story that is true to you. And, you know, we have this life that we lead, and it lasts for a certain period of time, and it's like, you know, you got to kind of like stop every once in a while and like enjoy some things.
That's really true, and I think the greatest argument for sort of staying is to stay connected. It's because even just today, right? Like I had I was at the seaport, you know, which sounds silly, just, you know, it's sort of natural, but I don't spend as much time there. But I was out at the seaport, had a meeting, you know, with someone we know, and she was with this other person who within 27 seconds knew someone else I knew. Right, from another part of my life, but also connected, right? And then, I took them over to Little Water Radio just to see it, because it's great. You know, the station's in its own home now. It's outside of the market. It's like it's a live room and and it's like it's great. And you saw it, yeah.
I did. It's a great facility. And
so Delphine Blue was DJing, and then this woman, when she was a kid, was on. Delphine interviewed her. Her mother worked when Delphine was on BA. Do you know what I mean? And then I'm on the way here, you know, so if you don't talk to people, you don't know anything.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Very good point.
And how our lives are connected, and how it's so important, you know, to get off your couch. And I know it's a ridiculous thing to say, but I do think that metaphorically, you know what I mean, to engage. And the only way to really, really do that is to go to, and if I can do my part in keeping free shows in New York City or wherever, but I live in New York, so it makes sense, you know, and creating a situation, right, and upping the ante in some way, which I'm working on, trying to do, to bringing people together, right? That's what anything in New York that's ever been worthwhile has been all about, is bringing people together. It's about selling tickets, and it's about blah 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 commerce. Sure. But the greater, you know, is bringing people together, and that's what the Seaport Festival did for many, many years. On Friday night, 7:00, you just came after work. You went there and you met all these people, became friends. You know, all these photographers that, you know, Chris LaPut, dear sweet Chris LaPut, so sad, you know, and you know, he became like a family member. You know, I mean, these, you know, there was. We would let people, you know, backstage, you know, all these young, Amanda from Brooklyn, all these people that were just kids with kids with cameras. I mean, this is in the early days of Brooklyn Vegan and all this kind of stuff. And can we get into this show and that show? And, you know, I remember like people at River were like, no, they, you know, the PR people, no, we don't know who you. Of course, I mean, this is like this is how it starts. This is the ground floor. This is the, you know, this is the seed. This is how the whole thing begins and starts, and people grow, and look where everyone is now. I'm not saying it's to do with that. I'm just saying I feel like we were part of it.
Yeah, definitely.
And that's I want to continue that. I want to give. There was a kid that used to come to the Seaport shows. I watched him grow up. Like he was obviously lived in the neighborhood. Yeah, and he would come. I saw like he was there in the front, like watching Wire, all these bands that he never would have seen.
Right.
He was like 12 or 14 or whatever, you know?
That's what I love about the Seaport audiences the most, is that there's obviously people that are specifically going for the bands that you book there. And when you have bands like Wire and you know, so many others, like they're going to bring like some core folks. And then you have people that are just around the neighborhood. And you start looking around when you're in the middle of that audience, and you're like, whoa, that dude or that couple or this group of people would never have been at the show that this band played at X venue or whatever. That's right. So that's what is really interesting.
That's right. And young people, older people that would never go to any of these venues. It's not about the money, but they just wouldn't think of going, or they would never go, and maybe they're just passing by, or they're curious, or or someone you have, you know, you're a fan of a band, but maybe 5 friends of yours are like, they're on the fence, but they go for free, they're going to go and see it, and then they're going to become a fan. There's value. There's like, it's something that everyone that I've known, agents, whatever, understood from the beginning, that was the great thing about it.
Right.
You know what I mean? And I feel like that's going away. You know?
Yeah. Well,
there's not, you know, and so I'm I want to try and make sure that it doesn't.
Yeah, someone has to hold the flagpole.
Someone has to, set that anchor.
I'm saying, and quite literally, at the seaport.
There you go. Anyway,
well, thank you so much, man. I appreciate your time, man.
See you.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Thank you. Hey, I want to thank my guest Stephen Dima for that incredible conversation, those stories, the Bill Cosby one, just talking about his dad, and that was amazing. The prodigy in China, so many stories, and I love doing conversations with people like that. And that's kind of the whole reason why I started this podcast to begin with. I feel like after we were done with that conversation, I was like, yeah, that's what I'm talking about. So you've been listening to The House List. Please, if you enjoyed it, subscribe on iTunes, rate it on iTunes if you can. All that stuff helps. If you'd like to listen to these on Stitcher or SoundCloud, please do so. But I encourage you to freely send it to friends, post it on your website or blog or however. I'm on Twitter at TheHouseListPod. So if you do like it, tag me in it and post about it or retweet it or however. Just trying to get the word out. So I appreciate you guys doing that. I'm down in Virginia. It's my dad's birthday, so I got to get going. We got some walking to do, 74 years. That's impressive and amazing, and I love it. I'm feeling good. So I want to thank you guys again for tuning in, and I will catch you guys next week, only here on The House List. As I say at every episode, I'm trying to come up with a tagline, but for right now, every episode is edited and engineered by my good friend CJ Stewart out in California. So shout out to him, taking the time to do these. It's a labor of love. So thanks again so much, and I will see you guys next week. Bye.